Good Saturday morning to you. It is October 13th, 2018, and maybe for someone in the world this might be considered the happy birthday edition, but we'll leave that for later. We have a full plate this morning, but we are not going to look at very many stories. We're going to look a little deeper into a couple of things, and first up on our plate is Pastor Brunson is free. And so let's go take a look at that story.
President Trump tweeted, "My thoughts and prayers are with Pastor Brunson. We hope to have him safely back home soon." He had tweeted a number of times. He spoke out publicly a number of times for Pastor Andrew Brunson. Vice President Pence, Secretary of State Pompeo, number of U.S. Senators, Tillis, Lindsey Graham, Shaheen, and many more, Langford, and other members of Congress. I can't name them all right now because, again, what we're focused on is that Pastor Brunson, an American and a Christian pastor who was imprisoned in Turkey for 2 years, charged with Christianization, and ultimately freed today in court. After being imprisoned and detained for just a little over 2 years. First, let me just tell you a story. You know, he was there in Turkey for 23 years, and he gets picked up back in October of 2016, and he's scheduled to be deported along with his wife. So he's in a deportation facility. Then he gets moved to a prison, but he doesn't face charges until March of 2018. So from October of 2016 to March of 2018, he's just being imprisoned. Ultimately, 4 months later, in July, after being charged, he is allowed to go under house arrest. Now, that was a positive development, but not the end goal, obviously. Here we are now in October, and Pastor Brunson has been freed. He has been ordered by the court to have his passport returned. He can freely leave the country. It's been ordered that it's time served, so he can leave the country. He'll get his passport, no longer be under house arrest. That could happen. He could be leaving Turkey as early as this evening, and I know the news will be covering that as well. I do want to make it clear that American Center for Law and Justice, we represent Pastor Brunson and the family, and I just want to thank all of you for allowing us to do that. Your support to the American Center for Law and Justice is the reason why we can represent the family, do this work, and let me again just thank the White House, the government officials. Stan, I'm thanking our audience as well and our supporters as well, because that's why we're able to engage on Capitol Hill. We've got the resources, we have the staff, we have the information, and that all takes support from our listeners, support from our members of the American Center for Law and Justice.
Yeah, no question about it, Jordan. In this instance, almost 600,000 of our members signed that petition. I think the number was 599,607. But that is particularly effective in two arenas, Jordan. First of all, and primarily in the halls of Congress, because it's their voters who sign the petition by and large. And so when their voters express an interest in a case, they get engaged. Certainly it means something to the administration, too, although I would tell you that the administration was engaged on this one really before those numbers started piling up. The second place, Jordan, where those numbers are so significant is in the international space. When we go to the United Nations or to the Human Rights Council and can demonstrate that several 100,000 people around the world are interested in a case and think that there's been an improper administration of justice, as we thought was the case for Pastor Andrew Brunson, it makes the world take notice. So, Jordan, really all of our efforts start with that grassroots piece, building the support among the grassroots. Then it goes to the administration level, then it goes to the congressional level, and ultimately to the international communities. But all of it, Jordan, it comes back to shining a light on these cases, and we do that by telling the story and getting people engaged. Many of our efforts, Jordan, would not be nearly as effective without that first piece being in place.
All right, folks, we are taking your phone calls at 1-800-684-3110. That's 1-800-684-3110. Michelle's calling in from New York on line 4. Michelle, welcome to Jay Sekulow Live.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Michelle.
I'm so happy, so happy. I heard about this situation this year when I was going through recovery. I got hurt on my job, and I heard about it on the radio, and of course I heard about other people praying. I called TBN and CBN, and just to hear this year what God has done. Like I said before, if it had not been for God, none of us would have heard this news today. I just give God praise for everyone that was involved. The president, just whoever thought about this particular man, and not just themselves, but somebody else's family. This is what happens when people, no matter what their ethnicities are, when people get together for a good cause. Look at what God can do.
You know, it's exactly right. I mean, people coming together. Let's not forget the power of prayer here, which is very important. The power of speaking out, the church coming together, because that's, again, and then taking that into action, taking the faith into action, reaching our leaders, working with our leaders who are willing to really go to the line, go to bat for Pastor Brunson. President Trump was willing to do it. Vice President Pence, Secretary Pompeo, their teams, their staffs, our embassy teams, consulate teams, the senators, the congressmen. I mean, this is, again, folks, it shows you there was an all-out effort here to see the release of Pastor Andrew Brunson from Turkey, and ultimately there were very tough measures taken against Turkey. I don't want to focus on those today because today is a day to celebrate. Hopefully, this will be something good for the relations between the U.S. and Turkey, who are NATO allies. I mean, ultimately, that's a big goal here. The kind of bigger picture. I even heard Pastor Brunson's sister talking about that, how important of a ally Turkey is to the United States, and that it shouldn't have this kind of relationship. So that's very important. Senator Graham was talking about that as well. I just want to underscore to all of you our thanks and how important it is to stay with it. These are tough cases. They take us a long time. So you tried diplomatic options. We had a White House and a president willing to take steps after diplomacy was not working, just to get it done, to even issue things like targeted sanctions on Turkish officials, to see the release of Pastor Andrew Brunson. And I cannot underscore enough how important it is that all of you stood by for those 2 years for Pastor Brunson. I know he thanks you, and his family thanks you. And as is usual in these situations, though he realized, because in Turkey it was such a big story, I think he will come to realize even more so over these next 24 and 48 hours how many people were following his story almost on a daily basis here in the United States, and certainly when there were updates on every news network throughout many different broadcasts and shows, some that I'll be doing later today, who have stood with this story and with this American pastor because of his wrongful imprisonment. We've got a second half hour coming up on Jay Sekulow Live. We're going to take your questions, your comments, 1-800-684-3110. That's 1-800-684-3110. We'll see if we can connect, too, with CeCe Heil as well. She's working directly with the Brunson family, one of our ACLJ senior counsels. So we'll connect with her to get an update there on how the Brunsons are doing. Both Pastor Brunson, his wife, his children. We'll do that in our second half hour. It's coming up. We are live, 1-800-684-3110. Pastor Andrew Brunson, after 2 years of imprisonment and house arrest, has been released. Will be on his way back to the United States very soon. Follow all of the updates as well. Go to aclj.org. Follow us on social media. Twitter.com/jseculo, Twitter.com/JordanSeculo, and of course our Facebook pages as well. And aclj.org. A lot of information to update you with, and you can share with your friends and family. All right, so a short break here. We are trying to get people updated again.
Our next story involves a young lady named Kaitlin Bennett. This story is interesting to me because of the young lady involved, and I can't remember how I ran across this story. It just sort of appeared in my timeline, and the best guess I have is that it was linked from somebody who is a follower of, or in fact Ryan Fournier himself, who is the leader of Students for Trump and was very active on the college level getting President Trump elected. Again, the young lady's name is Kaitlin Bennett. Let's go look at what I saw yesterday. I don't know who she is, and I did a little research after I saw this clip. So I also like to say that we don't have any context. We don't know what happened right before this clip. We only have 1:11. So let's see what happened in this clip. And by now, you may have read the tweet, but I'll read it anyway. Last night at a Trump rally in PA, a liberal protester touched me against my consent and said he'd throw me on the ground and rape me. Feminists around him who say we're supposed to believe women defended him and denied it happened. This is what the left has come to. All right, here we go.
In history. What? Tell me about the eight.
Don't touch me.
I want to touch you. Don't. Why not? Hey, I'm allowed to touch her.
No, you are not allowed to touch me.
Yes, I am.
No, you are not.
The goddamn ground and rape her. Because I have rights.
So this man just said that he could rape me if he wanted to.
Look at your supreme.
I don't want. I'm gonna go get the officers because that's disgusting. No, don't touch me. Don't touch me. No one touched you. Yes, they did.
I know he did, but we just got to back up away from this lady's store.
You can move away. You can move away.
That was messed up. That's why.
Yeah, it was messed up.
I heard that.
And I like how there's women defending him when he just said he could rape me. And there's women defending. I thought we believed women. I thought we supported women. That man just said he could rape me.
No, he did not.
Yes, he did. You're supposed to believe women. Why aren't you believing me? Ma'am, why aren't you believing me? You're a woman. I'm a woman. Believe women. Believe women. So this guy is following me. Do not touch me and do not come near me.
I shouldn't have said that.
Yeah, now you realize it. Do not stay right there. Do not come near me. Oh, we will put it.
So I've seen this several times trying to figure out what exactly transpired here. This man clearly touched her and then, thought better of it and then said, but you're not going to put this on tape the whole time he's smiling at her. And I am not making excuses for anybody's behavior in this clip. But I'd also like to point out that Kaitlin told him as soon as she felt him touch her to stop. It's all on tape. She's not the only one who taped it. So I did a little digging, and let's see who Kaitlin Bennett is. This is Caitlin's Twitter page. Now, if you if you just look at the header background, she's wearing a rifle. I'm no gun expert, so I'm not even going to guess what kind it is. And she has a graduation cap that says come and take it on the mortarboard. And then she is the grassroots director of the Liberty Hangout. And I pulled that down quickly because I'd like for you to guess where she goes to college. And we'll wait. And I'm not going to sing the little waiting song from the game show that I can't remember off the top of my head. But if you have a guess, great. If you don't, we'll just we'll look again. Promoting message of peace, prosperity, and property rights since February 11th, 2015. Official Twitter of the libertyhangout.org. Wait for it. Where did I see it now? Oh, right in front of my face. Liberty Hangout at Kent. All right, let's look at this again. Could that be Kent State University? Do you remember, those of you who have racked up a couple of decades, do you remember what happened to Kent State? Let's take a little trip down memory lane for some of us and throw some history at you for those who don't know.
The governor banned demonstrations completely, distributing 12,000 leaflets prohibiting protests. But the students either didn't get the message or they didn't care. By noon, nearly 3,000 students had congregated in the university commons, 500 protesting, 1,000 cheering, and 1,500 watching. That's when 100 guardsmen confronted the protesters with M1 rifles. What happened is still clouded in confusion. The general commanding the guard ordered the crowd to disperse from a jeep, but was met with chants and rock throwing. The guard retaliated with tear gas and advanced using bayonets on their rifles to push the crowd back. And it worked. The crowd dispersed. But then, as witnesses say, 28 of the guardsmen who had retreated up a hill fired between 61 and 67 shots, some in the air and some directly at the protesters. 4 students were killed. Victims Jeffrey Glenn Miller and Allison B. Krause were protesting, and William Knox Schroeder and Sandra Lee Scheuer were just bystanders. All were between 19 and 20 years old, and they were students in good standing. 9 other students were also injured. Troops claimed that they opened fire after being shot at by a sniper, but spectators heatedly denied that there were any gunshots before the guard opened fire. After the incident, Newsweek published an article with a famous photo of a 14-year-old runaway kneeling over one of the students who had been shot and killed.
Oh, here is the Liberty Hangout. This is the site that Kaitlin is involved, or was involved in organizing. She's still involved in standing up for the Second Amendment. And yes, it's that Kent State that we're talking about. It seems that volatile politics has not left Kent State in the intervening years. Another article on the same website, the Liberty Hangout, on Kent State University. And as you can see in the picture, somebody who goes by the handle Davis_dog reads as follows: "Is this the gunslinging slasher from KSU? Someone help." And then there's, a bunch of responses, and then somebody challenges this Davis_dog, in responses, and this is her response update. And then you can read the rest of what she tweeted in response. And I just have to say I'm astonished. I shouldn't be, but I am astonished that this young woman still has a Twitter account. She was suspended for a time. I'm not going to go through the whole saga because I don't want to read all her responses to this initial tweet. But you can see clearly here, this is Kaitlin. This is this girl, Kaitlin Bennett. Leftist stalks Kent State gun girl, takes photos, and threatens to assault her in restaurant. Okay, here we go. After her graduation photos with an AR-10 rifle went viral, Kent State graduate Kaitlin Bennett received countless death threats. Sorry about that little interruption. Online from leftists. While many of these threats have come from incensed anonymous liberals from all over the country this past weekend, Bennett received a much more credible one from just across a restaurant booth. Now, this was in July, and the clip we saw earlier was from Bennett at a Trump rally 2 days ago. On Saturday night in July, Bennett and her friend Natalie went to eat at a restaurant in Northeast Ohio just a week ago. Natalie herself was a victim of online harassment after leftists on Twitter bullied her off the social media platform for supporting the Second Amendment. Not having seen each other since, the two met at the restaurant to escape from the online drama for a night. Shortly after the two sat down, however, a group of young, overweight women entered the restaurant and immediately gasped when they laid eyes on Bennett. The group took out their phones and proceeded to snap photos of Bennett and her friend, making her feel visibly uncomfortable. Not only did they have to change booths because of the harassment, but the restaurant threatened to kick the group of women out if they continued. As they left, the waitress told Bennett that the women were in fact taking photos of her. A day later, tweets surfaced from one of the girls in the group who snapped photos. Amber Davis of Ravenna, Ohio, posted photos of Bennett to her Twitter with the caption, "Is this the gunslinging slasher from KSU? Someone help." And that's a quote. A follow-up tweet from Davis reads, and we've already, I'm not going to read it, but we can clearly see what it says. Davis continued to tweet about Bennett, posting, quote, "Another update. I made her cry," and then she gives the, abbreviation for laughing, close quote. She retweeted from her friend Kayla Dean, who responded, quote, "I salute you," close quote, to her tweet claiming she made Bennett cry, and responded, quote, "This means a lot," close quote. And there is the responses. The waitress from the restaurant messaged Bennett on Twitter and to update her on the situation, telling her, quote, she wrote on her ticket for our manager to go kill himself. Like, what makes you even think it's okay to say that? We showed him tonight. She posted these pics, and he said if they ever come here to his restaurant again, they're calling the police. LOL. Like, everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but there's no reason for her to be sitting here and saying that you should die, close quote. The waitress continued, quote, "She told one of the girls here that you should die and you get everything that comes to you," close quote. And then this is the waitress this is the screen cap of what the waitress said that we just read. And she has appropriately blacked out names and identifiers. Bennett told Liberty Hangout that, quote, just minutes after they walked into the restaurant, they were already threatening me on social media while sitting just feet away from me. I texted my boyfriend from the restaurant, letting him know these girls were harassing me, and he said he hoped I had my firearm on me. Little did I know at the time that not only was she taking pictures of me, but was threatening to assault me and saying she wants me to die, close quote. Bennett continued, I don't know why anyone would be dumb enough to threaten someone that carries. People like this are exactly why I support the Second Amendment and repealing existing gun laws. And so she's referring to restrictions. Bennett told us that while the girl did bother her vehemently, Davis did not make her cry. She thinks that Davis' tweet speaks to her character and only exposes the ill intentions she had towards Bennett while harassing her that night. Bennett is currently seeking charges against Davis, as is appropriate, in my opinion. We reached out to Davis for a comment, and she said, quote, bringing a gun onto campus where there was a previous history of students being murdered was a poor choice and was of poor taste. Also, I do not even have to bring up white. Also, do I even have to bring up white privilege? Yeehaw, hats off to you both. And I didn't threaten anyone, but yeehaw, go off, cowboy, close quote. But when we asked her what she meant when she said she would punch Bennett in the head, Davis replied, quote, fix your heart or die, close quote. And this is in support of Kaitlin and Campus Carry Now, which was a rally for Second Amendment rights and open carry on campus at Kent State in Ohio. All right, let's return to the desk for a moment. I'll admit that I frittered away a whole day yesterday, and as you can see by the clock, it's after 8 o'clock this morning, and I'm still in production. I really struggled. I could not get a handle on how to present this story. Should I present it in the context of Antifa's interference or counter-protest to conservatives? Should I put it in a broader light and talk about the left's agenda? You know, I really struggled. And then this morning, when I was looking at my news feeds, I decided to present it in a different light. And so we're going to move on to another story, and I'll have some concluding thoughts about how these all tie together at the end. I know, what does a royal wedding have to do with any of this? Well, let's find out. This was Friday. It was a relatively quiet wedding. And this first set of images is from goodhousekeeping.com. I apologize to the Brits and to the larger United Kingdom. I needed these three photos together to make my point. So we're using Good Housekeeping. So what is the point I'm getting at? Well, Princess Eugenie, daughter, here, this is Eugenie clearly here, daughter of Sarah Ferguson and Prince Andrew, who are now, have been for quite a few years, divorced, was married this weekend to a well-established wine merchant wine broker, actually, not merchant, a wine broker, at Windsor in St. George's Chapel. This is Eugenie. This is Sarah Ferguson. You'll remember she was great friends with Princess Diana. Both of them came from, comfortable middle-class backgrounds, but they were considered to be commoners at the time, which may or may not be true depending on your perspective on royal lineage and connections. And this is Princess Beatrice, who is Eugenie's sister. Now, why am I bringing this up? Well, and do you even remember who these people are? Were you even, were you even old enough to remember the wedding of Diana and Charles, or the wedding of Prince Andrew to Sarah Ferguson? Well, maybe this will refresh your memory. Do you remember this? This is from Princess Diana's wedding, and this is Princess Eugenie, and this is Princess Beatrice. And they got quite a lot of criticism for their fascinators. It is custom in Great Britain, if you are in the presence of the Queen, you cover your head if you are a lady. And ladies, the fashion currently is to wear, or has been to wear, these hats called fascinators. And they're just little pillbox type hats with some kind of frippery decoration, what have you. All right. Here is a shot of Sarah Ferguson, Princess Eugenie's mother, and Princess Beatrice, Princess Eugenie's sister. Now, the only controversy, other than the wind knocking the ladies' hats around, was so minor that it's not even worth mentioning, but one of the press decided to mention it, in that Princess Beatrice did not wear a hat per se. This would be considered a headband. But it's tasteful, and it is understated, as it should be, in comparison to the rather eye-catching headgear they wore when they were younger ladies at their aunt's wedding. All right. Where am I going with this? Well, if we go back to the wedding shot, whoops, not that one, this one. Princess Eugenie is wearing a beautiful gown, understated, very elegant, very appropriate for a wedding, in my opinion. This is my opinion. The trend of women wearing ball gowns without covering their shoulders and being appropriately demure and understated in church is something that that upsets me and gets my dander up. When you're in church, you are not there to show off your cleavage or any of that stuff. One of my nieces and I had a discussion a few years ago when she decided to wear a sundress to church, and I asked her to please put a sweater on while we were in church. And I explained to her why. That she was not, that this was church, and out of respect for Christ, not to make a show of herself, to conduct herself with dignity as is appropriate when you're in church. In my opinion, Princess Eugenie did that. Now, there's one thing about this dress. I don't have a shot because I needed these 3 shots together to make my points. Princess Eugenie's dress shows much of her back in a V shape. It mirrors the V shape of her neckline, although it goes a little deeper. It's not inappropriately deep. And I will give Princess Eugenie a bye on this one. Princess Eugenie wanted her scar to show. She has a distinctive, clear scar down the middle of her back because she had surgery for scoliosis when she was 12. Scoliosis is a twisting of the spine, and depending on the degree of twist, it can be very disabling. This is a critique, not a criticism, and there is a distinct difference. I am giving Princess Eugenie a bye with her exposed back in church because she wanted everyone to see her scar. She wanted everyone to see that you can overcome something very disabling and heal from it and move on. Would I have made the same choice? Absolutely not. Not in church. Maybe at the reception I would have worn a dress that had a deeper back for that purpose, but not in church. All right, moving on. So congratulations to the royal family on yet another fancy wedding. This was much more understated than either Prince William and Kate Middleton's wedding, and much more understated than Prince Harry and Miss Markle. So where am I going with this? You really clearly want to know by now, I'm sure. The difference between critique and criticism. And we're just going to read this. There are many pairs of words in the English language that are confusing for those trying to learn the language. The pair consisting of critic and critique is one example where people consider both as synonyms and use them interchangeably. This is a common perception that critique is the act of finding fault with a written piece, just like criticism. However, the reality is that there are subtle differences between critique and criticism that will be highlighted in this article, and then it defines critique as a detailed analysis or evaluation of something. If there is an authority on a subject, new writers ask the authority to formally critique their work. In this sense, the word is used as a verb, in other words, an action word, the act of critiquing. People mistakenly take critique as a way of passing a negative judgment about something which it is certainly not. Critique comes from French, and it has roots in Greek, kritikos, which means to judge or pass judgment. Criticism. Criticism is the act of pointing or highlighting the shortcomings in a work, person, attitude, belief, project, policy, or anything else under the sun. However, criticism is not always negative, as it is evaluative as well as judgmental in nature. In the English language, since early times, criticism has been taken to mean finding fault with someone or something or someone. Criticism has always been polite, and there has always been a deliberate attempt by critics to keep their evaluation within the limits, not allowing themselves to go overboard. So does that clear it up? No, not at all. Okay, it just makes it as muddy as it was before we started this little editorial. So we're not going to read all of this. We are going to go down to the conclusive sentence here. In general, critique is always impersonal. So that means it's not a personal judgment. and tries to improve something, whereas criticism can be personal at times and many times taken as an offense by the recipient. Why am I highlighting this? You might wonder. Well, let's go back to the desk and have a little chat. All right, I have been waiting to roll out this little feature for a while now, and because we have such a long scripture, I now can roll out the official chalkboard. We're going to call it the floating chalkboard since it doesn't quite fit in the frame. Maybe it won't be a floating chalkboard after today, but let's just deal with it. So the scripture is on anger and reconciliation, and we're just going to read it. This is from Matthew 5:22, and if you have a study Bible, it usually has the heading anger and reconciliation. Verse 21, you have heard that it was said to the ancients, quote, do not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment, close quote. This is Jesus teaching, and he goes on to say, but I tell you that anyone who is angry with his brother will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to his brother, Raka, will be subject to the Sanhedrin. Raka is an Aramaic word. It's an uncomplimentary word. And so then he says, but anyone who says, you fool, will be subject to the fire of hell. Therefore, if you are offering a gift at the altar and remember that your brother has something against you, and the end of that reads, leave your gift and go first to be reconciled to your brother. All right, what does it have to do with all this stuff that we saw today? We've been talking a lot in social media about the discord in the United States and the widening divide between the vision on the left for our country versus the vision on the right for our country. And it's not the vision so much that is important to the future of this country. It is the action to implement that vision that is important. And that's what you need to watch. So in the case of Kaitlin Bennett, we saw a young lady, clearly a self-confident young lady, knows what she believes and does not suffer fools lightly. Remind me to come back to that term, fool. Anyway, Kaitlin is standing up for the Second Amendment, the right to open carry, and I don't know this for a fact, but I'm going to assume that it is in connection, in part, with some of the campus shootings that we have seen over the last almost 20 years. And that if you are an adult and you are not otherwise barred from carrying in an open carry state, that you should be allowed to carry on campus. That she points out in an interview, which we did not include, that your rights as a citizen do not stop on the campus. And so the people that criticized Kaitlin, in particular the one young lady we featured, because we featured her because of her behavior, they're not arguing the constitutionality, which is the issue. They are arguing emotional, reactive points, which don't have anything to do with the rule of law. They might be persuasive arguments, but they don't have anything to do with the rule of law. And in that young lady's particular case, she displayed something well beyond critique or criticism. She displayed open hostility and threatened Kaitlin Bennett with violence. I don't know how this young lady still has a Twitter account at all. At any rate, in the case of Princesses Eugenie and Beatrice, they were soundly criticized, not for the choice to comply with royal custom for ladies, which is that you cover your head in the presence of the Queen, but for the types of fascinators they were wearing. Princess Beatrice in particular, people had a lot to say, and maybe Princess Beatrice was being a little rebellious. Maybe she was thumbing her nose at the tradition. I don't know. It was quite a few years ago, and now she is a young lady herself, and she comported herself with dignity in this instance. So we have nothing to criticize or critique about Princess Beatrice's deportment at her sister's wedding. And I've already gone over my critique, not criticism, of Princess Eugenie's wedding dress and why, and it would be my choice not to do that, but I am not criticizing her in any way for doing that. Why is this important? Well, let's bring it a little closer to home. And again, I am talking to Christians primarily, but if this logic and reason sounds good to non-Christians, then by all means, employ it. We as human beings need a consistent standard of behavior that we stay within the boundaries of in order to get along and to be able to resolve conflict and keep society stable and productive. And so for Christians, we have a rule book. It's a pretty extensive rule book, and if you study it long enough, you will gain some amazing insights. And if you attempt to apply it over your lifetime, then eventually a lot of it makes sense once you have life experience that highlights those lessons. Now let's deal with this business of calling somebody a fool. A fool in biblical, in theology, is a person who knows better, is of the age of reason, judgment, and accountability, and chooses not to abide by the whatever the rule or statute is. So, for example, a fool is someone who knows better, knows what the punishment and penalty and responsibility is, consequence for actions, and goes and steals from his neighbor anyway, and gets caught, and is subject to punishment, and then turns around and does it again and again and again and again. That can also be applied to our what we say about people. Gossip is one of the worst sins biblically, because you are verbally assaulting, battering, and even in some cases murdering someone's reputation. You are altering their ability to enjoy their own rights and freedoms permanently with gossip. We don't think gossip is a big deal. The famous example of the prayer request, the public prayer request. Please pray for so-and-so because she's involved in blah-de-blah-de-blah. Oh my goodness, that is gossip. That is a sin. But people just don't seem to see it that way. So how does this relate to the situation with Kaitlin and her detractor, Amber, the lady who threatened her? The lady who threatened her clearly is in the wrong and clearly should have to abide by the consequences of her actions, but somebody has to hold her accountable, and clearly Twitter has not. They have slapped her on the wrist and let her keep her account, threatening violence and stalking Ms. Bennett. Now, Ms. Bennett is going to press charges in the court, and she has every right to do so. In the case where we cited the princesses and their behavior, it was up to their parents and their sovereign to instruct them and correct them with regard to their behavior, even though they were adults, very young adults at the time. And so my comments about all these women are critique, not criticism. I am not personally putting them down. I am not calling them names. I am not maligning their character, even though I could, in the most extreme case, I could comment on the character of the woman who thinks it's okay to just say and do anything without consequence. But let's bring it a little closer to home even more. What does this mean in your everyday relationships? Your family, your parents, your siblings, your cousins, your friends. What does this mean? Well, Jesus addresses this, and he addresses it very clearly. He says, if you come to the altar in the temple or in your church and you are offering a gift, any kind of gift, and you remember that somebody has an offense against you, in other words, they are offended with you, not you offended by them, although the highest moral application of this statute would be it goes both ways. You are to leave your gift, not complete your worship activity in the form of sacrificial giving, whether it's tithing or what have you. You are to go to that person and not return to complete your gift donation and try and be reconciled. Now, the other person having free will granted to him, as an inheritance of his creator, is free to reject or accept. In the case of a sincere effort, if the other person does not accept it, then you are off the hook in terms of you can go straight back to temple or church or what have you and complete your act of worship with donating your gift or giving your thank offering or whatever. Does that mean you never have to engage with that person again? No, it does not. What it means is you remembered there was somebody was offended by something you did. You went and tried to rectify it and reconcile. It didn't work. You're not obligated to stand there and plead. You've done your part. But it does mean that you need to leave the door open should that person at some point in the future say, wow, I was a really unkind person, in the situation that was brought to my attention, and I need to go reconcile. Does that make sense? So how does this actually apply in real life, other than what I've just said? Well, let's say this. Let's say that one of your children marries out of your culture, and your culture strongly encourages that you marry within the culture. Do you reject your child and your grandchildren and everybody, your own child? Some cultures would say yes, they're cut off, they are no longer welcome in the community. And in the most strict Amish communities, for example, this is the case. If you leave the Amish community and marry outside into the English community, which is what they call the rest of us in the United States, then you're done. Some communities will allow you to live outside the community, but you are still allowed and encouraged to visit your family and parents. You might not be allowed in church, though. And so on and so on and so on. So if, in the case of parents and children, that's clearly, there are some mitigating factors. But there's no ambiguity about what Jesus told us to do. Be reconciled and watch your mouth. So in the case, let's reverse it. Let's say that one of your children or your best friend or your one of your other relatives rejects you and, leaves you with a broken relationship that you feel that you may or may not have had culpability in the original offense. Do you then reject an offer to reconcile? Clearly not, according to the scripture. You accept that effort to reconcile. Now, if the offending party is involved in lifestyle choices that are still sinful. So, for example, an alcoholic friend comes to you and says, I'm sorry, I'm in rehab, I'm trying to do better, and then goes right back to the bottle. Are you obligated to continue an ongoing relationship? No, you are not. You are not. But you are obligated to allow that person another chance to make it right. And yes, it's heartbreaking. Yes, it's painful. But that's what you're asked to do. You're asked to sacrifice some of your comfort, your peace of mind, and your own life agenda to reach out to the, less stable, less fortunate, less fill in the blank. And my prayer for all of us is that we see reparation, we see reconciliation, we see, a restoration of our relationships with people that we love and treasure. But the sad reality is that everybody's free will doesn't always allow that to happen. And that's very tough to live with. But you have to. And you have to do it with the knowledge and understanding that God hasn't given up on that person. As long as they are breathing, God has not given up on that person. And so maybe you stand back, maybe you keep your mouth shut for a change, and don't say anything, and hope for the best. So in the cases we have cited today, there is certainly an example of need for peace among two people. Somebody needs to change their behavior, and the other person has to accept that change. In the case of the girls and their mother, there have been behavior changes and maturity, and so we can accept their choices and move on. In the case of people who make a habit or build their reputation on criticizing other people, those of us who understand the difference between criticism and critique have the option to just walk away. You're not obligated to continue a relationship with somebody like that. And the dog is obviously not happy with me right now, although she does have her bone, so that's good. But it is not permissible when you are critiquing something, critique, not criticism, it is not permissible to attack that person openly and make disparaging comments about them personally. Critique, as we had defined it, is when you seek to create a positive change and an improvement. So if I submit this broadcast to appear and I say, please critique this, and one of the things they come back with is, it was way too long, you blathered on, well, that's valid, because I probably have. And with that, I will leave you with those thoughts on this beautiful sunny day. A little chilly in my neck of the woods, but it is not raining. Thank you, God, for not raining today. So, for me and the shepherd, I hope you have a wonderful weekend. And to someone out there today, I would like to say happy birthday and many, many more happy birthdays to come. Until I see you again, take care and have a great day.